You're listening to The Edge, 105.1 and 105.3 FM. Your life, your music.
Well, you're now inside the legal landscape, Season 5, Episode 5. And today's topic is fatal accidents. What are the rights of near relatives? It was recently reported that between January and July of this year, approximately 284 persons have died in 248 crashes. Now, the loss of a loved one is a traumatic experience, and it is often followed by increased financial burden on those left behind. So family members are left to grieve while also trying to manage funeral expenses. In some cases, they also lose a source of income, which only compounds their sadness and hardship. What many of us may not know is that the law provides recourse for those who are left behind after their loved ones pass away in a fatal accident. If the other driver is at fault, family members may claim damages from that driver on behalf of the deceased. Associate Attorney at DunnCox, Chantal Bennett, is our guest to help us understand the rights of near relatives under the Fatal Accidents Act. Good afternoon, Chantal.
Good afternoon. How are you?
You know what? Fair to find, thank you. And how are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Great. So now we're going to look at this very important topic, and I'm sure all ears are keen right now. Chantal, after a fatal accident, what determines if an action may be brought on behalf of the deceased under the Fatal Accidents Act?
Well, a claim may be brought successfully under the Fatal Accidents Act if there is evidence to show that, one, the death was caused by a wrongful act or by the negligence of the other party or parties, and two, if the deceased had not died, he would have been able to bring a claim against the other party. So to give you an example, it's a very unfortunate situation, but if you have a car accident and there's evidence to show that the accident was caused by the other party or parties driving recklessly, then this may be a case of neglect by the other party. Of course, each accident or incident has to be assessed based on the facts of the incident, and the person would need to seek legal advice.
All right. So who can bring a claim on behalf of the deceased?
Okay, so there are two sets of persons that can bring a claim under the Fatal Accidents Act. One is the personal representative of the estate of the deceased, and two, where there is no personal representative, then the near relations can institute a claim in their personal capacity. In either circumstance, the claim is brought for the benefit of the near relations.
Okay. Well, let me ask you for clarification. Who is a personal representative and a person of near relation?
Right. So a personal representative is defined under the Fatal Accidents Act as either the executor or the administrator of the estate of the deceased. Near relations mean a wife, husband, parent, brother, sister, nephew, or niece of the deceased person. So those are persons who are related to the deceased, and of course, as they can do, there'd be near relations or the personal representative who is the executor of the estate.
And what documentation is required to prove that a person is a near relation of the deceased?
So to prove that you're a near relation, if you're going to prove, for example, that you are a mother, you could get the birth certificate for the person who have died, as well as your own birth certificate, which would show the relation. Where you might have siblings, then you could use your birth certificate to show that you have the same mother and or father as the person who has unfortunately died.
We are speaking this afternoon on fatal accidents and the rights of near relatives. And you're listening to Associate Attorney at DunnCox, Chantal Bennett, who is explaining to us the rights of near relatives under the Fatal Accidents Act. Can you tell us, Chantal, the documentation required to prove that a person is a near relation of the deceased? And is there a time limit for bringing a claim on behalf of the deceased under the Fatal Accidents Act?
Yes, Dion. So the documentation would be the birth certificate. And in terms of the time limit, you have a limit under the Fatal Accidents Act of 3 years from the date of the death of the deceased to bring the claim. However, if the claim is not brought within 3 years, the court has a discretion to allow a claim to be brought in a longer period if the court is satisfied that such a period of time would be in the interest of justice. So essentially, the claim must be brought within 3 years. However, there's a discretion to allow a longer time if there's a reason for allowing such time.
And what is the scope of an award that the court may grant on a fatal accidents claim, Chantal?
So if the court finds that the party who the claim was initiated against was negligent, then the next step is to assess the damages. That is the amount that should be awarded to the claimant or claimants. In this assessment, it's important that the party bringing the claim show that they have suffered actual loss as a result of the death, 2, that they will suffer future loss, and 3, that they were dependent on the deceased. So important considerations may be the age of the deceased, the age of the claimant, and if the deceased was employed and contributing to the care of the claimant. So in other words, if unfortunately a relative that's close to you and defined as a near relative has died, then you could show that they were employed and you benefited from their employment. And now, unfortunately, that they have died, you're no longer accessing that benefit. The court would also look at funeral expenses. So it's important if a relative has died in a fatal accident that you keep all receipts to show these are the costs you would have incurred as the claimant.
Is there any other legislation, Chantal, that can be used to bring a claim where there is a fatal accident?
Yes, so in addition to the Fatal Accidents Act, we also have the Law Reform Miscellaneous Provisions Act. This act is a little different, as it's important to note that under the Law Reform Act, that the claim must be initiated within 6 years from the date of death. And if the claim is not brought within 6 years, you will not be able to bring the claim there after that time.
Well, we're looking at fatal accidents, the rights of near relatives. I certainly hope our listeners have found it interesting this afternoon. Before you go, any hashtags did you know, Chantal?
Yes, so in considering whether or not to bring a claim, one has to look at whether or not the claim involves a minor. What happens is that the assessment of damages in a fatal accident action depends in part on whether the deceased has the capacity to generate income. This means that the court will likely grant a smaller award in the event that it is a minor that has passed away and the minor was not providing a source of income to that claimant or claimant.
Thank you so very much. Very interesting topic to be on the edge and to be listening to this evening. Very interesting topic. It's not one I think that a lot of people think of, but with all the accidents that we've been having, it is definitely good to know. Thank you so much for sharing with us, Chantal.
Thank you, and have a good evening.
You too. Get home safe.
All right.
It just gives you reason to pause and stop and think, you know? And I certainly hope that after hearing this program, it will also help you to drive safely home this evening. You taking care of everyone else on the road and them taking care of you. What if a close family member died in an accident? Do you know what you would be entitled to? Or if you are the person who has died, what is your family entitled to? Very interesting one. Thank you very, very much for that. Legal Landscape, Season 5, Episode 5. What are the rights of near relatives in fatal accidents?
You're listening to The Edge, 105.1 and 105.3 FM. Your life, your music.